September 19th, 1944. A Wehrmacht supply sergeant named Klaus Müller stood beside his disabled Opel Blitz truck on a muddy French road east of Nancy, watching an American convoy pass. He counted trucks for 23 minutes before losing track, all identical, all moving, all loaded. His own supply column, a mixture of requisitioned French civilian vehicles, aging Opel trucks, and horse-drawn wagons, had managed to advance 12 kilometers in 2 days. The Americans in front of him would cover that distance in 20 minutes. Müller had served on the Eastern Front, survived the retreat from Stalingrad, and witnessed Germany's industrial decline firsthand. But nothing prepared him for this. In his diary, later captured by American intelligence officers, he wrote a single sentence that captured the essence of Germany's strategic defeat. "We are not fighting an army. We are fighting a factory." The story of America's 2.5-ton trucks represents one of World War II's most decisive yet underappreciated advantages. German military planners, proud of their blitzkrieg doctrine and convinced of American industrial inefficiency, initially dismissed American mass production as quantity without quality. They were wrong. The 800,000 trucks that would ultimately strangle the Reich demonstrated something far more profound than industrial capacity. They revealed the fundamental difference between tactical excellence and strategic dominance. This is the story of how democratic capitalism defeated fascist militarism through the unglamorous but devastating weapon of logistics standardization. For Wehrmacht commanders who had conquered Poland in weeks and France in months, the sight of endless American truck columns rolling through liberated Europe in 1944 revealed a truth they could no longer deny. Modern warfare was no longer decided primarily by battlefield tactics. It was won in factories, on assembly lines, and through supply chains that could sustain unlimited material expenditure. Germany had built a military optimized for short, violent campaigns. America had built an industrial system optimized for wars of attrition. The consequences of this fundamental difference would reshape the war and demonstrate that in total war between industrial powers, production capacity matters more than tactical brilliance. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The roots of American truck dominance began not in wartime mobilization, but in the peaceful industrial expansion of the 1920s and 30s. American automobile manufacturers had pioneered mass production techniques that Germany never fully replicated. Henry Ford's assembly line philosophy of standardization and interchangeable parts had transformed American manufacturing. By 1940, when the War Department began serious military procurement, American factories possessed capabilities that exceeded anything in Europe. General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, and dozens of smaller manufacturers had spent decades perfecting production systems that could rapidly scale output while maintaining quality. This infrastructure did not emerge overnight for the war. It represented generations of investment in factories, supply chains, skilled workers, and standardized engineering practices. In 1940, the United States Army Quartermaster Corps issued specifications for a new generation of military trucks. The requirements reflected lessons learned from observing the European War that had begun a year earlier. The military needed trucks that could operate reliably in all weather conditions, traverse rough terrain, carry substantial loads, and most critically, be produced in massive quantities using standardized, interchangeable components. The specifications called for a 2.5-ton payload, capacity, all-wheel drive capability, and designs simple enough for rapid mass production and field maintenance by soldiers with minimal technical training. 4 companies submitted designs. Yellow Coach, a General Motors subsidiary, Studebaker, International Harvester, and REO Motor Car Company all developed prototypes. The Army accepted all designs except REO's, which would later be refined and become successful in the 1950s as the M35 truck. Yellow Coach's design, designated the GMC CCKW, became the Army's primary medium truck. International Harvester's M56 went to the Navy and Marine Corps. Studebaker's US-6 was built primarily for export to Allied nations, particularly the Soviet Union through Lend-Lease. The GMC CCKW designation came from General Motors' internal classification system. The first C indicated the 1941 model year. The second C designated conventional cab configuration. K meant all-wheel drive with powered front axle. W indicated dual rear axles. Soldiers would soon know it by simpler names. Jimmy came from phonetic pronunciation of the GMC letters. Deuce and a half described its 2.5-ton rated payload capacity, though in practice the trucks often carried far heavier loads. Production began at Yellow Coach's Pontiac, Michigan facility in February 1941, 9 months before Pearl Harbor. By December 7th, when the United States officially entered the war, several thousand CCKWs had already been manufactured. Production immediately accelerated. Chevrolet Street, Louis plant began CCKW production in early 1942. By mid-1943, the two facilities were producing thousands of trucks monthly. Peak production in 1944 reached 2,600 trucks per month at the Pontiac plant alone. The CCKW's design represented American engineering philosophy at its finest. Rather than pursuing technical perfection or advanced features, designers focused relentlessly on reliability, maintainability, and production efficiency. The heart of the truck was the GMC 270 engine, a 6-cylinder overhead valve design producing 91.5 horsepower initially, later variants generating 104 horsepower at 2750 revolutions per minute. The engine delivered 216 pound-feet of torque at 1400 RPM, with a 3 and 25/32 inch bore and 4-inch stroke, creating a displacement of 269.5 cubic inches. This gasoline engine had originally been designed for commercial trucks, not military specifications, but its commercial origins proved advantageous. The engine was robust, reliable, and used components already in mass production. Power flowed through a Warner T93 5-speed transmission. Fourth gear was direct drive. Fifth was overdrive, allowing the truck to maintain highway speeds while conserving fuel. The transfer case included high and low range and engaged the front axle for off-road capability. Originally using Timken split-type axles, later production shifted to GM banjo-type axles. Both designs proved remarkably durable under the punishing demands of military service. The truck featured a ladder frame chassis with 3 driven beam axles. The front axle rode on leaf springs. The rear tandem used leaf springs with locating arms. This suspension system, though unsophisticated compared to some European designs, delivered the cross-country capability military operations demanded while remaining simple to maintain and repair. Early CCKWs featured closed metal cabs from GM's commercial truck line. These provided weather protection but created shipping difficulties. In July 1943, production switched to open cabs with canvas roofs and removable canvas doors. This design change served multiple purposes. It simplified manufacturing at a time when production speed was critical. It reduced shipping height, allowing more trucks to fit on cargo vessels crossing the Atlantic. It improved ventilation in hot climates, and it increased visibility for drivers navigating crowded roads and dangerous terrain. 1 in 4 cabs included a machine gun ring mount above the passenger position for a .50 caliber M2 Browning, though most trucks operated unarmed, relying on speed, numbers, and air superiority for protection rather than organic firepower. The standard cargo bed measured 12 feet long by 6 feet 10 inches wide. High wooden sides and removable canvas top protected cargo from weather. Stakes along the sides allowed the canvas to be rolled up for loading and unloading. To conserve strategic materials as the war progressed, cargo beds were constructed primarily of wood rather than steel. Late production trucks, built when material shortages became critical, used pressed cardboard in some body panels. These ersatz materials worked adequately for their intended purpose and freed steel for more critical applications like tank armor and ship construction. The CCKW could carry its rated 2.5-ton payload off-road or 5 tons on improved highways. Maximum speed on roads approached 45 miles per hour, though typical convoy speeds were significantly slower. Fuel capacity varied by model, with standard tanks holding 40 gallons. Range exceeded 250 miles under ideal conditions, less in combat operations requiring frequent idling, detours, and off-road movement. The truck's gross vehicle weight when fully loaded approached 16,400 pounds. Unloaded weight was approximately 11,050 pounds. What made the CCKW revolutionary was not any single advanced feature. It was the totality of standardization. Every CCKW, regardless of when or where it was built, used identical parts. Any mechanic trained on CCKWs could service any CCKW anywhere. Spare parts fit every truck in the fleet. This industrial standardization, taken for granted in American manufacturing culture, exceeded German capabilities by orders of magnitude. Between 1941 and 1945, GMC produced approximately 560,000 CCKWs across all variants. Sources vary slightly on exact totals. The most reliable figures suggest approximately 524,000 to 528,000 standard CCKWs were accepted by the U.S. Army, not counting the amphibious DUKW variant or cab-over-engine models. Of the almost 2.4 million trucks the U.S. Army purchased between 1939 and December 1945 across all payload weight classes, approximately 812,000, just over one-third, were 2.5-ton trucks. The vast majority were CCKWs. This made the CCKW the second most numerous American military vehicle of the war, exceeded only by the Jeep. Germany's truck situation presented a stark contrast. The Wehrmacht entered World War II with over 150 different truck models in military service. Manufacturers included Opel, Mercedes-Benz, Magirus, Krupp, Borgwood, Bussing, Hanomag, and dozens of others. Each model required unique spare parts, trained mechanics familiar with that specific design, and particular maintenance procedures. This fragmentation created continuous logistics nightmares. German units frequently had immobilized vehicles awaiting parts that would never arrive because manufacturers had ceased production, switched to military contracts, or been destroyed by Allied bombing. The most numerous German truck was the Opel Blitz, produced at the Opel Werk Brandenburg facility, built specifically for military truck production in 1935. The Blitz 3.6, a 3-ton truck, became the closest thing Germany had to a standardized military vehicle. Powered by an Opel 6-cylinder gasoline engine producing 73.5 horsepower, the Blitz had reasonable specifications on paper, but production told the story. Between 1937 and 1944, Germany produced approximately 130,000 Opel Blitz trucks of all variants. Of these, roughly 70,000 were standard rear-wheel drive models. Another 25,000 were four-wheel drive versions. Several thousand were converted to half-tracks called Maltiers to cope with Russian mud. The production comparison reveals the fundamental disparity. America produced approximately 560,000 of a single standardized truck model. Germany produced approximately 130,000 of its most common truck, which still came in multiple incompatible variants requiring different parts and maintenance procedures. And this was Germany's most successful truck. Total German truck production across all manufacturers and models during World War II reached approximately 347,000 vehicles. The United States produced over 2.4 million trucks in the same period. The ratio exceeded 7-1, but numbers alone do not explain the strategic impact. The decisive factor was standardization enabling reliability. American trucks used interchangeable parts. German trucks did not. American trucks could be maintained by any trained mechanic. German trucks required specialists familiar with specific models. American trucks had spare parts available through standardized supply chains. German trucks often sat immobilized, awaiting unique components that never came. This seemingly boring technical detail, the standardization of parts and maintenance procedures, proved more decisive strategically than advanced German engineering or tactical prowess. Germany's logistics problems extended far beyond trucks. The Wehrmacht remained predominantly horse-drawn throughout the war. This reality contradicts the popular image of German military mechanization, an image fostered by German propaganda focusing on panzer divisions, while ignoring the foot infantry and horse-drawn artillery that constituted the majority of German ground forces. The German army entered World War II with 514,000 horses. Over the course of the war, Germany employed approximately 2.75 million horses and mules. At any given time, roughly 1.1 million horses were in German military service. These animals were not ceremonial, they were essential. Approximately 80% of German logistics and transport relied on horses, only 20% was motorized. This dependence on horsepower created insurmountable problems in modern mechanized warfare. Horses require fodder. A normal German infantry division needed approximately 53 tons of horse feed daily. This fodder consumed transportation capacity that could otherwise have carried ammunition, fuel, or food for soldiers. Horses require rest. Units dependent on horse transport could not maintain the operational tempo of mechanized forces. During rapid advances, horse-drawn supply columns fell behind, creating critical shortages at the front. Horses suffer from weather. The Russian winter of 1941 through 1942 killed approximately 179,000 German horses in December and January alone, crippling logistics at the critical moment when Soviet counterattacks began. German soldiers captured after D-Day reportedly asked their guards, "Where are the horses?" as they watched truck after truck roll off landing ships. The question revealed how profoundly German military planners had underestimated American industrial capacity. They had assumed all armies depended heavily on horse transport as Germany did. The sight of a fully motorized Allied force operating without horses demonstrated a level of industrial development Germany had never achieved. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable all notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The collision between American industrial capacity and German tactical doctrine reached its dramatic climax in France during the summer and autumn of 1944. Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy, began June 6th. The initial assault involved 156,000 troops in the first wave, supported by nearly 7,000 ships and landing craft. The massive undertaking brought unprecedented quantities of equipment and vehicles to France. By the end of June, Allied forces had unloaded 170,000 vehicles through temporary Mulberry harbours and directly across the beaches. These makeshift piers, constructed in England and towed across the Channel, processed supplies at rates exceeding many established European ports. The breakout from Normandy's bocage country proved far more difficult than planners anticipated. For 7 weeks after D-Day, Allied forces remained confined to a beachhead only 50 miles wide and 20 miles deep. German defenders expertly exploited the defensive advantages of Norman hedgerows, creating a grinding battle of attrition. Operation Cobra, launched July 25th, finally shattered German defensive lines west of Saint-Lô. Following massive carpet bombing by Allied air forces, American infantry and armoured units burst through German positions and swept into open French countryside. General George Patton's Third Army became operational August 1st, and immediately began rapid advances at speeds that surprised even Allied commanders. Within weeks, Patton's forces were advancing 50 to 75 miles per week, sometimes covering 80 miles in a single week during peak operations. By mid-August, elements of Third Army had reached the Seine River, over 150 miles from the Normandy beaches. This operational success created an unprecedented logistics crisis. The Allied bombing campaign that had isolated Normandy from German reinforcements before D-Day had also destroyed much of France's rail infrastructure. The French railway system lay in ruins, unable to move supplies necessary to sustain rapidly advancing armies. Every division in combat required approximately 700 to 750 tons of supplies daily. With 28 Allied divisions advancing across France by late August, total daily requirements exceeded 20,000 tons. Patton's armoured divisions alone consumed 400,000 gallons of gasoline daily during offensive operations. The fundamental logistics problem involved distance. Each truck carrying supplies from Normandy to forward units had to make a round trip back to the beaches for another load. As the front advanced further east, round-trip times increased dramatically. A truck delivering supplies 200 miles from Normandy required over 50 hours for a complete cycle, including loading, driving, unloading, and returning. The same truck could make 2 deliveries per day when the front was only 50 miles distant. This geometric relationship between distance and delivery capacity meant that as armies advanced faster, the number of trucks required to sustain them increased exponentially. By August 20th, American armies were experiencing critical shortages of fuel and ammunition that threatened to halt offensive operations entirely. Forward units literally ran out of gas within sight of retreating German forces. The rapid advance that had characterized August was about to stop, not because of enemy resistance, but because supply trucks could not keep pace. Victory was being limited not by tactical failure but by physics, distance, and insufficient transportation capacity. Something dramatic had to be done, or the Allied advance would grind to a halt just as success seemed within grasp. In a desperate 36-hour planning session beginning August 23rd, Transportation Corps officers developed a solution that would become legendary. Colonel Lawrence Albert Ayres, known to subordinates as Little Patton for his aggressive leadership style, led the effort. They would create dedicated express routes using parallel one-way highways, reserved exclusively for military supply, traffic operating continuously 24 hours per day, no civilian traffic, no other military movements, just supply trucks moving forward and empty trucks returning, running day and night without pause. The system would be called the Red Ball Express. The name derived from late 19th century American railroad practice. Beginning around 1892, the Santa Fe Railroad marked priority freight cars containing perishable goods with red balls painted on their sides, giving these trains right-of-way over all other traffic. The term Red Ball became standard American railroad terminology for express shipping that tolerated no delays. During D-Day preparations, a logistics system in England had used the name Red Ball Express to rush supplies to southern ports for the invasion. Transportation Corps officers borrowed the name for their new operation. Assembling sufficient resources for the Red Ball Express required extraordinary effort. Colonel Ayres needed approximately 6,000 vehicles, 12,000 drivers working in 2-man teams, mechanics to maintain the fleet, traffic control personnel, and route systems that could handle continuous traffic without creating gridlock. The trucks were readily available. With over 560,000 CCKWs already produced and production continuing at high levels, finding 6,000 trucks posed no difficulty. The challenge was organizing them into a single coordinated operation and finding enough drivers willing to work under demanding conditions for extended periods. The Army's solution reflected the racial realities of 1940s America. Approximately 75% of Red Ball drivers would be African American soldiers. The American military in 1944 remained strictly segregated. Military leadership largely believed African Americans unsuitable for combat roles, relegating most black soldiers to service and support units. Quartermaster and Transportation Corps units were predominantly African American. These young men, many barely out of their teens, would prove far more valuable to victory than anyone anticipated. 132 existing Transportation Corps truck companies were consolidated into the Red Ball Express. The operation began August 25, 1944. 2 parallel routes connected Normandy supply dumps to forward logistics bases near Chartres, approximately 125 miles inland initially, later extending further east as Allied armies advanced. The northern route carried loaded trucks eastward. The southern route carried empty trucks back to the coast. Both routes were closed to all other traffic. Military police controlled every intersection. Trucks drove in convoy formation, maintaining close intervals to maximize throughput. The initial goal was moving 7,000 tons daily. By early September, the Red Ball Express was delivering over 12,500 tons per day. Operations continued around the clock. Drivers slept in their cabs during brief rest periods. Maintenance crews worked roadside, repairing vehicles without removing them from the route. Trucks moved in an endless stream, their red ball markings painted on doors and bumpers, giving them absolute priority over everything else on French roads. The physical demands on drivers were extraordinary. Shifts lasted 12 to 16 hours. Drivers navigated unfamiliar roads, often in darkness with only blackout lights. French roads, not designed for heavy military traffic, developed ruts and potholes that made driving hazardous. Accidents were common. Trucks broke down frequently, requiring rapid roadside repairs. Drivers faced exhaustion, poor food, inadequate rest facilities, and discrimination from white American units stationed along the routes. Yet they kept driving. Private James Ruckard of the 3898 Quartermaster Truck Company later recalled the experience. "We knew what we were doing mattered. Every gallon of gas we delivered meant our guys could advance another mile. Every box of ammunition we hauled meant they could keep fighting. We were exhausted, but we were proud. We were winning the war, one truckload at a time." This sense of mission sustained drivers through conditions that destroyed lesser men. The Red Ball Express operations exposed the full magnitude of the industrial disparity between America and Germany. Wehrmacht supply officers watching American convoys pass could only marvel at the endless procession of identical trucks, all operational, all loaded, all moving. German logistics officers calculated that the Red Ball Express alone was moving more tonnage daily than entire German army groups could sustain. The comparison was devastating. A 1943 German infantry division's supply train employed 256 trucks and 2,652 horses, attended by 4,047 men. This mixed motorized and animal-powered system could barely support divisional operations within 50 miles of railheads. The Red Ball Express, using standardized American trucks, was sustaining operations over 200 miles from supply sources. The efficiency differential was roughly 8-1 favoring American logistics. German commanders began to understand that they were not losing to superior tactics or better soldiers. They were losing to an industrial system that could produce trucks faster than Germany could destroy them, deliver supplies in quantities Germany could never match, and sustain operations at a tempo German logistics could not support. This realization was devastating. Tactical excellence meant nothing when the enemy could afford unlimited material expenditure while you rationed every shell and gallon of fuel. The Wehrmacht's retreat across France in late summer and autumn 1944 became a rout partly because German logistics could not support any sustained defensive stand. Units fell back not because American combat power was overwhelming, but because German supply chains had collapsed. Horse-drawn transport could not keep pace with motorized retreats. The few German trucks still operational lacked fuel, ammunition stocks were exhausted, food supplies ran out. Units that might have organized effective defensive positions instead continued retreating because they lacked the logistics infrastructure to stand and fight. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 provided final proof of Germany's logistics bankruptcy. German forces achieved tactical surprise and initial success, penetrating Allied lines and threatening Allied supply dumps. But from the beginning, German planning relied on capturing American supplies. The offensive's logistics plan assumed German spearheads would capture American fuel depots to keep advancing. This desperation planning reflected Germany's impossible situation. They were planning a major offensive whose success depended on stealing enemy supplies because they lacked sufficient organic logistics to sustain the attack. The offensive failed partly because American logistics responded faster than German planners thought possible. Despite losing important supply dumps in the initial breakthrough, American forces re-established supply lines within 48 hours. Truck convoys immediately redirected to threatened sectors. Artillery units defending key positions fired without restrictions, expending ammunition at rates that would have exhausted German stocks immediately. Meanwhile, German spearheads ran out of fuel within sight of their objectives. The 2nd SS Panzer Division halted after crossing the Auwirth River, immobilized by empty fuel tanks. The 1st SS Panzer Division abandoned dozens of vehicles after exhausting fuel supplies. German ammunition shortages developed almost immediately during the Bulge offensive. Artillery units conducting preparatory fires exhausted stocks within days. Resupply failed because German horse-drawn supply columns could not navigate icy Belgian roads at speeds necessary to keep pace with advancing units. The few motorized supply units Germany retained lacked sufficient fuel to operate effectively. In contrast, American logistics responded to the crisis with speed that stabilized defensive positions within 48 hours. Artillery units defending key positions fired without restrictions, expending ammunition at rates that would have exhausted German stocks immediately. The Battle of the Bulge proved to be the final demonstration of the logistics differential that had shaped the Western Front since Normandy. American forces could sustain unlimited material expenditure. German forces operated on starvation logistics, making sustained operations impossible. Once American logistics began flowing to defensive positions, the outcome was never truly in doubt. The offensive that Hitler had hoped would split the Allied armies and force a negotiated peace instead demonstrated conclusively that Germany lacked the industrial capacity to challenge American military power. The Red Ball Express operated for 83 days, from August 25 through November 16, 1944. In that period, it delivered approximately 412,000 tons of supplies. The operation wore out approximately 50,000 tires. Thousands of young drivers pushed themselves beyond reasonable limits because soldiers at the front needed what they carried. By mid-November, Allied logistics had transitioned to more efficient systems. The port of Antwerp opened on November 28 after Allied forces cleared German mines and obstacles. Rail lines were being repaired and put back into service. The desperate emergency that had necessitated the Red Ball Express had passed. But the legacy of those 83 days endured. The Red Ball Express had demonstrated several profound truths about modern warfare. Logistics could be decisive. Democratic industrial organization could respond to crisis more effectively than rigid authoritarian systems. Ordinary soldiers, performing unglamorous but essential tasks, could prove as valuable to victory as elite combat units. And most significantly, industrial capacity had become the foundation of military power in ways that tactical doctrine could not overcome. The approximately 800,000 American 2.5-ton trucks produced during World War II represented far more than transportation assets. They embodied American industrial philosophy, democratic organizational capacity, and the strategic advantage that standardization provided. These trucks sustained 85 American divisions in Europe, delivered over 7 million tons of supplies to European theater forces between June 1944 and May 1945, enabled unlimited ammunition expenditure that broke German defensive lines, maintained fuel supplies for mechanized advances that outran German retreat capabilities, and provided logistical security, allowing American commanders to fight without worrying that supply failures would compromise operations. The German Wehrmacht never recovered from losses sustained during the pursuit across France in late summer 1944. Divisions shattered in Normandy and destroyed during the retreat to Germany were never adequately rebuilt. Equipment losses exceeded industrial replacement capacity. Manpower casualties could not be replaced with soldiers of equivalent quality. Most significantly, logistics deficiencies that had hampered German operations throughout the war became insurmountable as Allied air superiority destroyed rail networks and fuel shortages immobilized remaining motor transport. Germany's horse-drawn logistics system, obsolete when the war began, proved completely inadequate for modern mechanized warfare. The approximately 3 million horses Germany employed during World War II represented a logistics nightmare that consumed resources, limited operational tempo, and created vulnerabilities that American mechanization ruthlessly exploited. Every ton of fodder transported to feed horses was a ton unavailable for ammunition or fuel. Every unit delayed while waiting for horses to rest was a unit unable to respond to fast-moving mechanized attacks. Every horse that died from exhaustion, starvation, or enemy action represented a logistics capacity that could never be replaced within the time frame modern warfare demanded. The contrast between American trucks and German horses epitomized the fundamental industrial disparity that decided the war. American factories produced standardized vehicles in quantities that seemed impossible to German observers. German industry struggled to maintain production of diverse vehicle models using increasingly scarce resources and forced labor that could not match free workers' productivity. American trucks were designed for mass production, using interchangeable parts and simple maintenance procedures. German trucks represented quality engineering, but lacked the standardization necessary for truly efficient logistics. When the war ended in May 1945, American forces in Europe operated the most sophisticated logistics system ever developed. This system had sustained the largest amphibious invasion in history, supported the fastest sustained advance in modern military operations, overcome setbacks during the Bulge Offensive, and delivered Allied armies to the Elbe River on schedule. The 2.5-ton trucks had been the foundation of this system, the unglamorous but essential vehicles that made everything else possible. The strategic lessons proved enduring. Modern military power depends as much on supply chains as firepower. Industrial capacity wins modern wars between peer competitors. Standardization and interchangeable parts matter more than advanced individual designs when operations must be sustained over extended periods. Democratic industrial organization can mobilize resources more effectively than authoritarian systems when properly structured. And the soldiers who drive trucks deserve recognition equal to those who drive tanks. The racial dimension of the Red Ball Express carried profound implications that extended beyond military logistics. Approximately 75% of Red Ball drivers were African American soldiers serving a nation that denied them full equality. They served in segregated units, faced discrimination from white American soldiers, and returned home to face continued racism and limited opportunities. Yet their service during those 83 days proved something that could not be denied or erased. Black Americans could perform any mission when given opportunity. They could organize effectively, work under demanding conditions, and contribute decisively to victory. Many Red Ball Express veterans joined the civil rights movement after the war, applying organizational lessons learned in military service to the struggle for equality. They had proven their worth and capability under circumstances that destroyed lesser men. They had demonstrated that racial barriers were artificial obstacles that harmed the nation, maintaining them while conferring no benefit to anyone. The knowledge they carried from France to America, that they had been essential to victory, could not be taken away even as racism persisted for decades after the war ended. Private William McLeod of the 39th 98th Quartermaster Truck Company spoke at a Red Ball Express reunion in 1998, 54 years after the operation. At 83 years old, he reflected on what those 83 days had meant. "We knew we were doing something important. We knew we were proving something, not just to white America, though that mattered. We were proving something to ourselves. We could do anything anyone else could do, if given the chance. The Red Ball Express gave us that chance, and we did not waste it." The technical specifications of the GMC CCKW, while important, mattered less than what the truck represented. The 91.5 horsepower engine, the Warner 5-speed transmission, the 12-foot cargo bed, the 40-gallon fuel tank, these were merely components. What made the CCKW decisive was that 560,000 of them existed, all identical, all using the same parts, all maintainable by any trained mechanic, all sustainable through standardized supply chains. This standardization represented American industrial culture's greatest strength. Germany never achieved comparable standardization. The Opel Blitz, Mercedes-Benz L3000, Magirus A3000, and dozens of other truck models serving in the Wehrmacht each required unique parts and specialized maintenance. A German supply officer needed to track dozens of different parts catalogues, train mechanics on multiple systems, and maintain separate inventory for incompatible vehicles. An American supply officer needed to track one parts catalogue for CCKWs, train mechanics on one system, and maintain one standardized inventory that fit every truck in the fleet. This seemingly boring administrative detail, the standardization of parts and procedures, proved more decisive strategically than any tactical innovation or battlefield victory. Germany could win individual battles through superior tactics, better training, or more experienced soldiers. But Germany could not win the logistical war of attrition because German industry lacked the organizational culture and manufacturing philosophy that made true standardization possible. The American industrial system that produced 800,000 2.5-ton trucks did not emerge spontaneously for the war. It represented decades of investment and development. The factories that built trucks were constructed over decades. The machine tools that shaped parts were developed through years of refinement. The supply chains connecting raw materials to finished products were built gradually through countless business relationships and transportation networks. The skilled workers operating machinery had learned their trades through years of apprenticeship and experience. The engineering culture emphasizing standardization and interchangeable parts had evolved over generations. When war came, America could surge production dramatically because the foundation existed and only required expansion rather than creation from nothing. Factory floor space could be added to existing facilities. Production shifts could be extended from 1 to 3. Workers could be trained using existing expertise. Supply chains could be scaled up using established relationships. This ability to rapidly scale production distinguished American industry from all competitors. Germany, despite impressive industrial capacity and justifiable pride in engineering excellence, never built that foundation comprehensively. German industry excelled at quality but failed at quantity. German engineering produced superior individual designs but struggled with standardization necessary for mass production. German manufacturing achieved impressive output in specific areas but lacked the systematic organization, enabling the full industrial mobilization America demonstrated. These weaknesses, minor in short campaigns against inferior opponents, proved fatal in extended conflict against comparable industrial powers. The Blitzkrieg succeeded brilliantly when German forces could advance faster than their logistics could fail. Poland fell in weeks. France collapsed in months. Both campaigns ended before logistics problems became critical. But when Germany attacked the Soviet Union in June 1941, launching the largest military operation in history involving over 3 million men advancing across a 2,000-mile front, logistics limitations immediately constrained operations. German spearheads advanced hundreds of miles into Soviet territory during summer and fall 1941. But supply lines stretched thinner with each mile gained. Horse-drawn supply columns fell further behind mechanized combat units. Fuel shortages forced operational pauses just as breakthroughs seemed achievable. Ammunition stocks ran low at critical moments. When the Russian winter arrived in late 1941, German logistics collapsed completely. Over 179,000 horses died in December and January alone. Trucks froze solid for lack of antifreeze. Supply columns could not navigate ice-covered roads. Units at the front ran out of everything simultaneously: fuel, ammunition, food, winter clothing, just as Soviet counterattacks began. The contrast with American logistics proved devastating. When American forces landed in Normandy in June 1944, they brought integrated logistics planning that Germany had never achieved. Supply calculations had been made months in advance. Beach landing procedures had been rehearsed until they became routine. Temporary port facilities had been designed, constructed in England, towed across the Channel, and assembled on French beaches within days of the invasion. Within weeks, these improvised facilities were processing more cargo than many established European ports. The Mulberry Harbors represented American engineering and organizational capacity at its finest. Massive concrete caissons, each weighing 6,000 tons, were towed across the Channel and sunk to create breakwaters protecting artificial harbors. Floating piers rose and fell with the tides, allowing continuous unloading operations. Road networks connected beaches to inland supply dumps. Traffic control systems managed the flow of thousands of vehicles. Within weeks of D-Day, the Mulberries were unloading 7.5 million gallons of fuel and 500,000 tons of supplies monthly. German military planners watching Allied logistics operations understood they were witnessing industrial capacity beyond anything Germany could match. The endless truck convoys, the unlimited ammunition expenditure, the massive supply dumps containing mountains of material, all of it demonstrated that America was fighting an entirely different kind of war than Germany was prepared for. Germany was fighting a traditional military campaign, husbanding resources and rationing supplies. America was fighting an industrial war of attrition, overwhelming German forces through unlimited material superiority. The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. American factories produced 2 million military trucks during World War II across all weight classes. Germany produced 347,000 trucks total. American industry delivered 297,000 aircraft. Germany produced approximately 119,000 aircraft. America built 86,000 tanks. Germany built approximately 67,000 armored fighting vehicles, including both tanks and tank destroyers. In every category of military production, American output exceeded German output, often by factors of 2 to 1 or greater, but raw production numbers alone do not explain Allied victory. The decisive factor was sustainable production. American factories produced vehicles, aircraft, and weapons using free labor, working in well-supplied factories with access to unlimited raw materials. German factories increasingly relied on forced labor working in bombed facilities with acute shortages of critical materials. American production increased throughout the war, peaking in 1944. German production peaked in late 1944, then collapsed as Allied bombing destroyed factories and Soviet advances captured industrial regions. The sustainability differential was decisive. America could afford to lose equipment and replace it quickly. Germany could not. An American tank destroyed in combat was replaced within weeks. A German tank destroyed could not be replaced at all by late war, as production no longer kept pace with losses. An American truck that broke down was repaired using readily available standardized parts or simply replaced with an identical vehicle. A German truck that broke down often could not be repaired for lack of parts and could not be replaced because production was insufficient. This grinding arithmetic of attrition, unglamorous but inexorable, decided the war's outcome as surely as any battle. German soldiers might be better trained. German tanks might have thicker armor and bigger guns. German aircraft might have advanced jet engines. None of it mattered when American industry could produce replacement vehicles faster than Germany could destroy them. In wars of attrition between industrial powers, production capacity determines victory more than tactical excellence. The legacy of America's 2.5-ton trucks extended far beyond World War II. The GMC CCKW influenced all subsequent American military vehicle design. Its emphasis on reliability over advanced features became doctrine. Its use of commercial components adapted for military service became standard practice. Its focus on maintainability by soldiers with basic training shaped specifications for generations of military vehicles. The M35 truck that replaced the CCKW in the 1950s incorporated many lessons learned from CCKW operations. The M35 served American forces for over 40 years, from Korea through the First Gulf War, testament to the soundness of design philosophy the CCKW pioneered. Modern American military logistics doctrine traces directly to World War II experiences. The emphasis on standardization, the focus on sustainable supply chains, the integration of transportation planning with operational planning, all of these emerged from lessons learned supplying Allied forces in Europe and the Pacific. Every American military operation since 1945 has built on foundations laid during World War II, when truck drivers proved as essential to victory as combat soldiers. The story of German reactions to American trucks reveals the psychological dimension of material superiority. Wehrmacht soldiers watching American convoys pass experienced a profound demoralization that tactical defeats could not produce. Losing a battle to superior tactics or better soldiers was comprehensible. Losing because the enemy had unlimited trucks, carrying unlimited supplies, represented a form of defeat that broke morale at fundamental levels. German soldiers understood they were fighting an enemy that could afford to waste material resources, that could leave vehicles beside roads rather than spending hours attempting repairs, that could fire artillery barrages containing more shells than German units possessed in total. Captured German documents reveal this demoralization. One Wehrmacht logistics officer wrote in August 1944, "We calculate supply requirements in terms of what can be transported. The Americans calculate in terms of what they wish to expend, then arrange transportation to match requirements. We operate on shortage assumptions. They operate on surplus assumptions. This fundamental difference makes continued resistance pointless." This officer's report reached German High Command in September 1944. By then, the observation was accurate but irrelevant. Germany lacked the industrial capacity to change its situation. The American trucks rolling through France in autumn 1944 carried not just supplies, but proof of a fundamental principle. Industrial capacity wins modern wars. Democratic capitalism can mobilize resources more effectively than fascist militarism. Free workers in well-organized factories produce more efficiently than forced labor. Standardization matters more than engineering sophistication when operations must be sustained over extended periods. These lessons, learned through the grinding attrition of total war, reshaped military thinking for generations. The human cost of these strategic realities must not be forgotten. Every German soldier who died because supplies did not arrive was a casualty of industrial disparity as much as combat. Every German unit that surrendered because ammunition ran out was defeated by factories in Detroit and Pontiac as much as by Allied soldiers. Every German tank immobilized by empty fuel tanks represented a tactical advantage nullified by logistics failure. The unglamorous arithmetic of supply defeated Germany as surely as battlefield combat. For the young men who drove Red Ball Express trucks through France in autumn 1944, mostly African-American soldiers facing discrimination while serving their nation, the experience carried lifelong significance. They had proven themselves under demanding conditions. They had contributed decisively to victory. They had demonstrated capabilities that racism denied. 50 years later, when veterans gathered for reunions, they spoke with pride about those 83 days when they kept armies moving through sheer determination and endless driving. The GMC CCKW, the Deuce and a Half, the Jimmy by whatever name, these trucks represented American industrial power at its peak. 560,000 identical vehicles, all using the same parts, all maintainable by any trained mechanic, all sustainable through standardized supply chains. This achievement exceeded anything Germany accomplished, not because German engineers lacked skill, but because German industry lacked the organizational culture making true mass production possible. America had built that culture over decades. Germany had not. This difference, more than any tactical innovation or battlefield victory, decided the war's outcome. When Klaus Müller, the Wehrmacht supply sergeant who watched American convoys pass in September 1944, was eventually captured by advancing American forces in March 1945, he was held at a prisoner of war camp in Belgium. American guards noted that Müller spent hours watching American supply operations, observing the truck convoys moving continuously along roads adjacent to the camp. One guard asked why he stared at trucks rather than attempting escape or plotting resistance. Müller replied through an interpreter, "I am watching the reason we lost. I knew in September we could not win, but I needed to understand why. Now I understand. You did not defeat us with better soldiers or superior tactics. You defeated us with factories and trucks and an industrial system we could never match." There is a certain comfort in that understanding. We were not beaten by cowards or inferior men. We were beaten by a system that produces unlimited material and delivers it where needed. Against that, courage and tactics mean nothing. This conversation, recorded in American military intelligence reports, captured the essence of Allied victory. Material superiority, enabled by industrial capacity, sustained by standardized logistics, decided World War II's outcome in Europe. The dramatic battles, the tactical innovations, the heroic stands, all of it mattered less strategically than the grinding superiority of American production, delivering unlimited supplies to soldiers who never had to ration ammunition or worry that fuel shortages would halt. Advances. 800,000 trucks. Each one nearly identical. Each one repairable using standardized parts. Each one sustainable through supply chains optimized over decades. These trucks, unglamorous and utilitarian, strangled the Third Reich as effectively as any combat operation. They proved that in modern industrial warfare between peer competitors, production capacity determines victory more than battlefield prowess. They demonstrated that democratic capitalism can mobilize resources more efficiently than authoritarian systems. And they showed that standardization, proper logistics planning, and sustainable supply chains matter more than advanced individual designs or tactical excellence. The Germans who laughed at American trucks in 1941, dismissing them as crude compared to German engineering sophistication, had stopped laughing by 1944. By then, Wehrmacht soldiers watched American truck convoys pass and understood they were witnessing their own defeat, rolling forward one standardized vehicle at a time, carrying unlimited supplies to soldiers who would never run out of ammunition or fuel. This was the truth that industrial capacity decided modern wars. This was the reality that 800,000 American trucks made undeniable. This was how democracy defeated fascism, through factories and supply chains as much as through battlefield courage. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.